regions that allow the purchase of small arms, and due to its handiness and low cost, it increases the susceptibility or vulnerability of homes and communities, especially those in conflict areas. Possession of such can bring fear, trauma, and increase in gender-based violence. It's used to threaten civilians' lives and used to force victims to engage in violent acts such as killing, rape, domestic, and sexual abuse. These acts of threatening civilians of their lives constrain their freedom and their right.
Despite the name, small arms does not decrease the threat that it poses at home and in the community. The very fact that one is in possession of arms, regardless of its type, challenges the safety and security of those around him or her. Similarly, small arms thus can increase the vulnerability of homes, communities, or conflict zones to gender-based violence. Possessing small arms can increase the chances of domestic violence and abuse. Moreover, it can also pose a threat to the safety and security established in the community that can foster gender-based violence. Gender-based violence can be strengthened by the possession of arms that can put those who the culprit deemed inferior in danger. Instances like the aforementioned can increase the vulnerability of people when it comes to increasing gender-based violence as a result of possessing small arms. Hence, we should do our part in spreading awareness against gender-based violence and promoting disarmament.
An increase of small arms ownership would create an even greater hostility in the different affected areas. The possession of arms would intensify the current uneven gap of power between the oppressors and the oppressed. In doing so, jeopardizing the safety of the victims of gender-based violence and continue the discrimination against the oppressed gender. The easy access to small arms would induce fear in the victimized communities and conflict areas. Armed violence in terms of gender-based violence would further enforce the existing gender-based power balance that is found in social-cultural norms and keeping the abuses away from ceasing.
The importance of global ceasefire to community, especially to conflict-affected areas, is that people can cope up with their life economically and stay home safe without thinking about their securities, because some of communities, including my hometown, does not only suffer because of COVID-19 pandemic but also because of continuous firefighting. Instead of staying home safe, they are struggling in the evacuation center. With the global health crisis we are facing right now, we should set aside war. Let us support the global ceasefire, because we can control war, but we cannot handle this unseen enemy that kills 1.4 million of people worldwide. So that we must focus our attention to combat the COVID-19 pandemic, or else all life aspects will put into risk.
Before I answer the question, I would like to quote Secretary General Antonio Guterres in lieu to global ceasefire response. There should be only one fight in our world today, our shared battle against COVID-19. The unexpected outbreak of the COVID-19 virus has caused an unmitigated global health crisis that has deeply impacted countless lives around the world. In times of crisis, we must avert circumstances that may aggravate the phenomenon we are currently facing. Instead, we can channel our entire focus on how to mitigate the effects of the pandemic that has evidently disrupted the ordinary. The pandemic alone has caused enough social and economical damages that will absolutely induce irreversible effects that can be felt years into the future. Answering the question, the importance of global ceasefire in these circumstances is to make people focus their attention on resolving the existing pandemic that has rapidly spread globally.
The ongoing pandemic in itself is already a threat to the living, especially those in the marginalized sector in our society and areas of conflict around the world. With this, the call for global ceasefire has become more significant, especially those in the areas in which armed conflict is still rampant, as having this would suffice and lessen the fear and anxiety of many and allow each individual to focus with their own and their family's safety. A global ceasefire is a need. as we collectively are trying to survive the everyday effects brought by the pandemic. We do not need more casualties. We need each to prioritize the welfare of everyone beyond age, racial, societal, religious, and other groups that divide us all.
So the pandemic has made the world more vulnerable to any forms of problems, issues, or violence because of the social, economic, and political effects it has caused. At the same time, other forms of threats are also emerging, which makes it harder to resolve because the problems keep on piling up. Hence the importance of a global ceasefire. If we have a global ceasefire, it will allow states to shift and refocus their attention on addressing the most pressing issue, which is the pandemic. And if this were to happen, people can also prioritize combating and protecting themselves against this invisible threat rather than also worrying about the other dangers that they might encounter. It is also important for us to know our priorities. We have millions of people who are being infected by this virus, and yet several countries are still allocating a huge portion of their budget for military expenditures, which cannot possibly be the solution to the problem we are facing now. In a way, it can even pose as an even greater threat, especially to communities, homes, and those living in conflict areas who are also vulnerable to armed threats. Hence, it is only necessary for all states to take part in this global ceasefire to reduce people's fears and to allow the governments to heed the call of their citizens for an effective and efficient response to the pandemic.
The goal of disarmament is to completely abolish war and the usage of armaments. It is important in protecting human rights as war and violence comes with it, and humans have the right to be free from torture and cruelty. We humans have the right to be free from punishments, detentions, executions, and inhumane treatments that these weapons of arms could build up. Countries who acquire these could rise the threat that leads to conflict. Yes, disarmament is a human right. The spending of these military usage could be reallocated to humans' most basic needs like food, housing, healthcare, education, and acquisition of these arms could not benefit us at all. We all have the right to a safe, secured environment and free from any threats of violence. Yes, disarmament is a human right.
Hi, I'm Dina Rose Jane Henan, and I'm a member of Young Women Plus Leaders for Peace Philippines. Living in a community that is susceptible to experiencing different kinds of conflict and having experienced the ugly reality of conflict myself at the age of 13, I strongly believe that disarmament is imperative in protecting our human rights. Conventional weapons have negative effects on our fundamental right to life and our right to peace. Spread and availability of armaments threatens physical safety, endangers stability and welfare, and diminishes social and economic development, contributing to a cycle of poverty, underdevelopment, and distress, which is true to many communities where I am from. It also absorbs the already scarce resources that could otherwise be used for vital economic and social purposes, particularly to those who are heavily affected by armed conflicts. I think for me, I believe that disarmament is key to development and human security and is a human right. Thank you.
One important aspect within the definition of human rights is the right to life and liberty. Every single individual has the right to live a life free from all fears of war, violence, or armed conflict surrounding them. The universal right to peace and disarmament for all women, men, and children lies at the center of the realization of all human rights. Hence, disarmament is extremely important in protecting human rights. Most countries argue that their military forces and armaments are for the protection of their state's vital interests and to protect their citizens' right to life. However, such an argument remains to be ironic in itself. Governments should instead protect their citizens on a regular basis against the omnipresent threats to human security without the use of armaments. Many people, especially women and children, suffer in war-prone territories or in places where they are no longer living a normal and peaceful life that they ought to be living. War and violence in any form negatively affect one's social, economic, and cultural rights that sweeps away one's basic human rights due to the many human implications this may cause to an individual. Disarmament thus reduces the possibility of violence, deaths, and threats to human life, which likewise protects basic human rights of all individuals. It eliminates people's fears of destruction, conflicts, and sufferings, and it allows people to live a life free from all violence of any form. Disarmament means building a community of peace that could restore good governance and save people from all their fears, and at the same time, protect and promote the human rights of all.
When talking about human rights, this includes each and everyone's background and one's way of living. So, one of the important aspects of human rights is our freedom and our ability to choose what we think is right and best for ourselves and for the people that we care for. Also, peace and order is attained once human rights are fulfilled. So, yes, disarmament is a human right, and it also plays a significant role in protecting human rights. Disarmament encourages communities, especially those in conflict areas, to aid in peaceful negotiations and resolutions. It might not decrease worldly violence as much, but it will surely help communities and individuals heal as they would feel more safe, more secured, and hopeful for a more peaceful future.
The youth consists of 1.8 billion of the entire population in the world. Can you imagine if each one of them is empowered to take action against the issues of our society? What more if it's about the disarmament of nuclear and dangerous weapons across the world? According to the United Nations, the youth plays a crucial role in strengthening the foundations of the future, using the innovative and creative ideas that they generate based on experience and the stories that touch the heart. Motivated by these, the series of campaigns that the youth made truly creates a great impact on policy and decision-making process of governments. The youth shapes and envisions the future that you wanted to perceive. They bring the change that you wanted to see in the world. As part of the youth, I believe that we are the leaders of the future, and we are motivated by hope that one day the world will be a better place for everyone.
The youth of today plays an important role regarding disarmament. They are our voices. They're our speakers. They are the ones who bring social awareness by joining in social, civic involvements, posting related contents on their social media pages, and creating this new whole movement. They are our builders in terms of building new strategies, creating new strategies that could help us reduce the number of casualties brought by weapons of mass destruction. They are also our educators who continue to teach us about this issue and teaching us normal citizens on how we can prevent. After all, we would want to have a brighter future ahead of us.
Youth play a crucial role in the global campaign against small arms and nuclear weapons. We understand that the gateway to a better future is by learning the lessons of the past. In school, we were taught about the dangers of nuclear weapons and why it should not exist. In everyday news, we hear about numerous cases of gun violence that were manifested at home, in our communities, and even in the entire world. It is high time for all of these things to stop. It is high time for the youth to unite and act. We have all the means to end gun violence. We possess the knowledge of the past. We have the energy, and technology has brought us closer than ever before. And we can use that as a tool to encourage others to join the movement, to join the call for a global ceasefire. Because the role of the youth is to build a world without wars, homes without violence, and a secured future free from the threat of nuclear weapons. In that way, the future generations, the future youth, will embody the same values and belief that our world is not a place for violence.